Hey everybody, I hope that you've all had a great week. I wanted to take a few minutes and just talk with you about an important update on our efforts to clean up our waters, protect our environment. Now, as you know, I've discussed it already. 9 of the last 11 years, our communities have received discharges out of Lake Okeechobee that each and every one of us, we knew them to be toxic. But in the past, the Army Corps of Engineers, they repeatedly refused to acknowledge that the water they were discharging was toxic and harmful to human health. Now, we've fought very hard to get the EPA's attention on this issue, and in May, the Environmental Protection Agency, they announced that any level above 8 parts per billion microcystin is too harmful for human contact. To put that into perspective, last summer we were receiving discharges that were about 495 parts per billion microcystin. That's a very toxic level. That, of course, it made the Army Corps' position of denial increasingly difficult to defend. Now that brings me to the big news of the week. I had the opportunity to get the Army Corps of Engineers on the record at a congressional hearing the other day, and I wasn't going to let them off the hook easily, so I asked them a very simple and direct question. Does the Army Corps of Engineers acknowledge that the water they have transferred from Lake Okeechobee to our coastal communities has been toxic? Finally, for the first time ever, the Corps of Engineers admitted to willfully, knowingly releasing toxic water containing cyanobacteria and harmful algal blooms from Lake Okeechobee to the St. Lucie and the Caloosahatchee rivers. Now, the importance of this admission, it cannot be overstated. The Army Corps of Engineers, a branch of the United States military, has now admitted to intentionally directing toxic water without warning into communities on the east and west coast of Florida. That's a very big deal. It's more clear now than ever before that we absolutely must institute long-term change to the way the Army Corps of Engineers operates. That's why I've already introduced 2 bills this year that would require the Corps to prioritize and protect our health when they make operational flood control decisions. The first bill, the Toxic Health Threat Warning Act, would require the Army Corps of Engineers to test the toxicity of the water prior to actually declaring and making those discharges that they do so often in the summer times. And if the water is contaminated, what those tests come back for, they have to warn the public of the health effects of what that water tested positive for prior to them actually discharging that water. That's a basic level of good governance. Tell the communities what's being sent to them, especially if they know that the water is toxic. The other piece of legislation, the Protect Florida Act, it would amend the Army Corps' operational priorities to prioritize public health and minimize harmful discharges. Now, both of these bills, they're common sense pieces of legislation, especially now that the Army Corps has admitted to discharging toxic water out of Lake Okeechobee and poisoning our communities. The bottom line is this: the change the Army Corps made lowering Lake Okeechobee this winter, it was a purposeful change. The Army Corps has written us letters telling us how they intended to purposefully lower the levels of Lake Okeechobee during this winter in preparation for hurricane season. So those changes to prevent discharges, it is working. Right now, Lake Okeechobee is substantially lower than it was this time last year. That means we have this much more buffer before the Corps of Engineers has the lake at a level that they feel they need to start discharging water, and they must commit to making these changes long term to prevent this massive public health crisis. Anything less than that is an unconscionable failure by our government. Now, shifting gears just a little bit, I want to quickly tell you about a new caucus that we just formed here in Washington to protect our environment. Obviously, that goes right along with what we do more than anything in this office, and it's called the Roosevelt Conservation Caucus. And this group, this caucus, it's inspired by our 26th president, Teddy Roosevelt, who was an avid conservationist. Specifically, our new caucus, it's going to emphasize conservation, work on a number of different fronts, including protecting Americans from harmful risks of water pollution, ensuring fishable and swimmable water, reducing ocean plastic pollution, increasing access to America's public lands and waters for outdoor recreation, hunting, fishing, so much more, everything that conservation is all about. By working together, I'm confident we can make real progress to strengthen conservation programs, promote public health, defend our environment, keep our air clean, protect our waterways. On that note, I hope that you all have a great weekend ahead. As always, it is an honor to represent you here in Congress. I always look forward to seeing you all around, and I wish you all the best.